We continued chapter 1, and we did finish chapter 1, and we actually went through all of chapter 2. And we basically made it through the end of creation week. We then kind of went back to a little bit more detail, as God sometimes does, right? He kind of gives the overview, and then he goes back and fills in some extra details, particularly about the creation of man, the environment, the Garden of Eden, and woman. And now we move on to chapter 3. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead around the room again, as we usually do. And maybe what we'll do is we'll do 4 verses apiece. We can start off with Joe and work around the room.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Chapter 3, the fall of man. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman.
All right. Already we got a whole lot there. Any comments or questions so far? Before I share a few things? Any thoughts, observations?
Well, there is a dialogue between Eve and the serpent.
Yeah.
And questionings, question after question.
Yeah, there's definitely a dialogue, there's questions. What was the first lie that the serpent told? And did he say one yet?
It's like, when you generalize, like when he said, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Kind of like, because he said you can eat from all of them except for one, but the question implies.
How does your version read that?
This version says, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?"
Okay.
That's NIV.
Mine says that too.
Yours says that too?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And it kind of leads one to question what God says. That was like trying to create confusion in our mind.
So in the King James Version, it doesn't say any, it says every. And I'm trying to see, so I've got like a Bible app here, right? So I'm just going to read through a whole bunch of different versions, because reading through different versions will sometimes help you get at least a general picture of what most people would translate it. So the AKJV, which I don't know what that, American King James Version, says, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden." Okay, and then American Standard Versions, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden," same exact thing. Bible in Basic English, "Has God truly said that you may not take of the fruit of any tree in the garden?" So they also say any. English Revised Version, "Did God really tell you that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And those are more modern. So interestingly enough, all of the more modern translations seem to translate that as any and not every.
But that implies
ISV,
something
"If
that
you're
is
not to eat from any tree." Huh?
Yeah, but that question implies that kind of like he's not allowing you to eat any of the fruit. Like,
I think I think I prefer every. Translation is difficult. For those who know two languages know that sometimes you can translate things and they can mean very different things. I don't
We're
think.
learning that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, here's an example, right? If I were to translate ¿Qué onda? If I was to do a literal translation, it'd be like, "What wave?" But obviously, while those are the words, it's actually a greeting or salutation. So it's kind of like it's an informal greeting or salutation. It's basically kind of saying what's up. Likewise, I could translate what's up in Spanish, and you can see how that could just sound like a very strange question. Um,
Yeah, if you
So-
want to translate what's up, what would it be? ¿Qué?
¿Qué arriba? ¿Qué es arriba? ¿Qué está arriba? ¿Qué está arriba?
Like, what is it up?
Yeah,
Down?
what is like what is
A
up?
literal.
Literal translation. What is up? Well, so here's I guess the reason why I don't agree with it. Why I wouldn't, and it's a matter of opinion, I guess. Wouldn't go with the. I don't think that's what the serpent would have said. Only because I think that's not a very. That's not realistic, and that doesn't seem to promote what Satan is trying to, or what the serpent is evidently trying to do. Obviously, they could eat from some of the trees of the garden. To say you can't eat from any tree is kind of like is a very foolish question, I think, because well, it's a blunt lie. Because yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to accomplish anything, right? Like if the question is asked, oh, so God says you can't eat from any tree, then it kind of makes the serpent seem a little bit unwise, right?
Yeah, and it sounds sometimes like what at least I remember experiencing when I was a teenager. Like, you know, when you explain your friends, yeah, we don't do this because, you know, we believe it's better not to drink this or that or do this in the disco, or you go to the disco, for instance, and we say, oh yeah, you're from the church. They don't tell, they don't let you do anything. So they would tell you like that. My friends would
Yeah, that's
oh,
true.
They don't let
That's
you do
true.
anything. Oh, I think
Yeah,
many
you know,
other things.
that's a good point.
Right, and they
Maybe.
tell, oh, you cannot do anything. You need to ask your pastor if he allows you to do this. No, it's not about the pastor, is it?
Yeah.
You know? I
That's a
remember they
good-
would tell me that.
That's a good point. I in the every question, I see it as a little bit more diabolical because it paints God in a very negative light. So if you take 10 trees, if there's 10 trees in the garden, we know there's more than 10. Let's say there's 1,000. And God says you can eat from 999, but you can't eat from one. Satan would not be lying if he said, oh, so God said you can't eat from every tree. Right? But you can't eat from every tree. That would be true. So that would be a true statement. That you can't eat from any tree would be a false statement. But there's diabolical. But maybe it was a sarcastic remark, as you pointed out. So I don't know. Just that's curious. I never noticed until just now that it's translated different in the newer, in the more modern translations. So if that was if what is said was any, then that would definitely be the first lie. If it wasn't, what would be the first lie?
You won't die.
Yeah, the very next thing. That was most definitely, you shall not surely die. All right, let's keep going.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
And this is kind of just curiosity, but is there any symbolism for putting the tree in the middle of the garden? Is there any reason for its placement there?
I haven't thought about that. In the midst of the garden. Well, both trees were kind of like, were both trees? I feel like both trees were together, but I can't remember if that was the case.
The tree of life.
Were they together now? In the previous chapter, did it say anything about the trees?
I don't think so.
No, it just says in the midst of the garden was a tree of the life. It was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But it doesn't mention.
In Genesis 2:8 says, el Señor Dios hizo que crecieran suelo toda clase de árboles, árboles hermosos y que daban frutos deliciosos en medio del huerto puso el árbol de la vida y el árbol del conocimiento.
So, yeah.
So
Both were in the
Both
middle.
trees were together.
Oh yes, that's true. Both of them
Right.
were there. I didn't see that. I just saw the tree of the knowledge. The
Reminds
tree
me-
of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So both were in the middle.
It reminds me like the verse in Exodus, like when it says, "Before you place death and life."
Yeah, for sure.
It says in Exodus, I don't know what chapter, but I remember it says, "Before you I place death and life, I basically commanded you to choose life, and you will do this." So it kind of like always we had a kind of like a choice before us.
Yep.
It's like both things are in front of us. And I see with the trees the same thing, like the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So they both are there. They
Side by
have
side.
access. You have access. So you have a choice basically. Which one you're gonna take? And she
Mm,
basically went to the other one. That's what it shows me, but I don't know if there is more.
yeah. I was actually just checking some commentary, see if I can find any comment on it. But I can't see of any what the significance might be of them in the middle. But they were definitely pretty accessible, I guess, no matter where in the garden you were.
Allow you to remember constantly, because if you go from one end to the other end to the garden, and say you have the horses, or you have to go, you cross the center probably. I don't know. I don't know how big was it, but
Yeah, it's interesting. We're not sure how big was this garden.
I found the verse now.
What verse was that?
The one that I just mentioned now,
Yeah.
Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. It says, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him."
Yep. For sure, there was an element of choice there in the two trees. Why it was in the middle of the garden, I don't know. But something to think about for sure.
A question that we can write it down once we get to heaven. I have a lot of questions right now.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay, so interesting dialogue so far. Do you want to continue, Matthew?
is that okay for you, Spanish?
Fine.
Can you follow?
Yeah.
English? Okay. Dios sabe que en cuanto coman del fruto, se les abrirán los ojos y serán como Dios, con el conocimiento del bien y del mal. La mujer quedó convencida, vio que el árbol era hermoso y su fruto parecía delicioso y quiso la sabiduría que le daría. Así que tomó del fruto y lo comió. Después le dio un poco a su esposo que estaba con ella y él también comió. En ese momento se les abrieron los ojos y de pronto sintieron vergüenza por su desnudez. Entonces cosieron hojas de higuera para cubrirse. Okay. Cuando soplaba la brisa fresca de la tarde, el hombre y su esposa oyeron al Señor Dios caminando por el huerto, así que se escondieron del Señor Dios entre los árboles.
Okay. A whole lot happened there on those verses.
Well, and it sounds interesting. In my version said that the wife, the woman, give it to her husband that was with her. I don't know if in your version says that, like he was with her.
Who was with her?
Who was with her? Okay.
This says, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. I'm not sure the with her. Wonder what other translations say. Bible and Basic English. When the woman saw the tree that was good for food and delightful to the eyes, to be desired, to make one wise, she took its fruit and gave it to her husband. That's the Bible in basic English. English Revised Version.
First of all, what I see in the sentence here, verse 6, it says, at the end it says, she took some and ate it. And then it's a period, like.
Right.
And then another sentence continues, says, she also gave some to her husband. It doesn't mean that it happened at the same time, but it's kind of like, it's a motion, right? Like when we say in the sentence, in the morning, we walk, stuff like that. That's what it makes me think. It happened probably the same day, but it doesn't mean like the same time.
Right, but when you read who was with her, sounds more like he was present when she was doing it the first time, right?
Yeah.
It could come across that way, but it could also mean that he was with her in the garden.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe not in the exact
Same
same
space,
space.
but
Same
not in the
space.
same place.
Yeah.
Yeah. The implication is that Eve is talking to the serpent alone because Adam doesn't seem to be a part of the conversation.
Uh-huh.
And and it's given in kind of that order, like she ate, and then she took, and then he ate. So it seems that way, and I think most commentators say that as well. The other thing is that there's always that mention, right, when you go to the New Testament, how it mentions that Eve was deceived, but Adam wasn't. So, she was deceived by the serpent, so that means Adam wasn't deceived by the serpent. He just ate the fruit because his wife gave him the fruit.
He made a choice, basically. He
Right.
knew that she already
Let's see if I can
ate
find.
something that it wasn't supposed to.
Yeah. I was trying to see if I could find the mention in the New Testament about. Okay. In case you're wondering, I did find it. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. We can read verse 13 as well. So 1 Timothy 2, 13 and 14. It says, for Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. So the New Testament writers allude to the fact that Adam wasn't deceived when he made his choice, but Eve was deceived. They're both guilty, they're just guilty of a different sin in that sense. And I think that's interesting there's something interesting to note about that later on.
So we made a conscious decision.
I think so. And personally, now this is not because the Bible says, but just my opinion, analysis on that. And I know that other commentators comment in like fashion. Essentially, Eve was deceived. She made the choice. She ate the fruit. Adam loved his wife, didn't want to lose his wife, and therefore decided that he would share in her fate, whatever it was. And interestingly enough, ironically enough, he ate the fruit because he loved his wife and wanted to share in her fate. But later on, as we'll know, when he gets confronted, things have changed, right? How quickly, sin changed their mind. He kind of threw her under the bus the moment that God questioned.
Exactly.
I wouldn't say twist, just threw her under the bus.
He
It's like,
forgot under the
La
bus,
mujer
too.
que tú
Huh?
He
eres.
He threw God under the bus too.
too.
The woman you gave me tricked me, brought me and I ate. So,
You got a
Yeah.
2-for-1 there.
yeah, unfortunately. Going back a little bit, right? Notice the dialogue though between Eve and Satan, right? A little bit before, like the whole. So in the midst of that dialogue, right? Um, Satan is kind of trying to imply the day that you eat, you're going to be wise. Why do you think Eve believed him? I mean, at this point in time, she might have spent more time talking to God than to the serpent. But in this very short dialogue, already the serpent was very convincing. Any thoughts?
Did she know what a lie was?
She might not have known what a lie was. Up until that time, she had never heard a lie.
Right.
Everyone that had ever talked to her had only spoken the truth.
Yes, like when a kid is like a little one, right? A kid is very naive.
Yeah, anything you tell him, he'll believe it.
Yeah, they will believe in Santa Claus. Or
And it,
Tooth fairy.
Tooth fairy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The other point, right, is that up until now, no other animal has spoken to her.
Uh-huh.
But this animal is speaking.
Right.
We don't really, I feel like we don't have the full conversation. We kind of have the highlights. Because the Bible does not have every single dialogue, every single word documented. We understand that, we get parts of the story. Just like when you watch a movie, you only get parts of the story. So I wonder if the serpent did not, kind of look at me. I ate the fruit and now I can talk. Or, what other enticements might have been used. Obviously, there was something there that really enticed, right? And led her to believe, like, I ate the fruit and look at me. If you eat the fruit, you'll be like God, right?
Imagine
that part
she ate it and then nothing happened. Because, right?
Well, that's exactly what
like
happened.
She didn't do like, oh, look, I can fly, or I don't know. And then that's why her husband trusts her.
That's what the Bible says, that she was deceived. Somebody that was deceived means that somebody was enticed to do. I mean, was revealed, right? A whole picture of what was going on.
Now, did Satan lie when he said you would be like God, knowing good and evil?
No, that was true.
That was true.
It was true.
But what she gained was exactly what he said. What she didn't know, what she was buying. You're going to be like God. You're going to know good and evil. Up until then, they didn't have a knowledge of evil. No. And the world would have been really happy if they had never acquired a knowledge of evil. But what she did was she acquired a knowledge of disobedience.
Is there any discussion somewhere about how long they may have talked, or was this their first encounter? Like, how long did
it
take
was
for
their
her to
first
be deceived?
encounter. No, there's
nothing like
that I know of. There's no talk anywhere about how long it took, but neither about how long they were in the garden. Let's say. I would imagine that it would have to have been short. Satan's advantage at this point in time, coming to Adam and Eve, was their innocence and their lack of experience, and so he jumped on it right away. Plus, they don't have any children, so obviously it definitely happened within a year's time. How soon it happened, though, was it months? Was it weeks? Was it days? We don't know. I venture to say it was pretty quick, but because I think they're still pretty innocent. They're probably still at the point where they're still getting to know God, essentially, right? If they're at the point where they're doubting Him, maybe. But I don't think Satan would have wasted any time. I think he would have jumped on the opportunity right away.
Does the Bible say about anything about God, Satan doing the same thing? Like he was allowed, or he was sent here when he was, cuando lo sacaron del cielo.
Mm-hmm.
He was sent here, or he was able to go to any planet or any.
I think it's more like he was allowed. So what the Bible tells us when you go to the Revelation is that he was banished from heaven. He hadn't been banished from anywhere else. So he was banished from
Oh,
heaven,
okay.
and by heaven I mean the place where God lives, the place where the angels live, and the place where formerly Lucifer and his angels lived. They got banished from there. So, yeah, the idea is that he probably, I would imagine that he was having committed the rebellion. He was probably looking for allies. Unfortunately, he found one on planet Earth, and it would appear that, and the fact that planet Earth had just recently been created would probably have been a more likely, it would have probably led him to think that it was a more likely, more likely that he could obtain the victory there, right? Versus some of the other planets. I don't know that that would have kept him from trying. I'm sure he would have tried. How much he succeeded in deceiving, I mean, when you think about it, Satan obviously campaigned in heaven. And because he campaigned in heaven, he gathered a following in heaven. But it seems that he didn't gain a following from any other planet except from Earth. Mind you, by the time that he was probably going around planet to planet, now you have evidences that other beings could see, but that the angels didn't have when they had their falling away. Right? In other words, when we read the book of Revelation, and this is all just deduction, because it's not said, right? But in Revelation chapter 12 specifically, it just says that Satan and his angels were cast out of heaven. So before they were cast, actually it says there was war. So basically war broke out. So at some point in time, there's this desire, which actually the Bible does insinuate. Satan started to desire the seed of God. Here, don't take my word for it. Isaiah chapter 14. Isaiah 14. We're digressing, but that's okay. We're talking about the serpents. And by the way, I will go through a few passages, but think about this. We know that it's Satan, but how do we know that it's Satan? How do we know that the serpent is Satan and not a really smart animal? We'll get there. Isaiah 14.
Right, because right there it's not saying this is Satan.
Right?
That's
It just
what I
says.
that's what I like
It just
about
says
the
the
Bible.
Lord created
Yeah, that's really
You know what
interesting.
I like about the Bible is
What's that?
because in Genesis it's very general. Like there is not so much specifics, but once you start reading through the whole book by book, you're starting remembering and filling the gaps that it wasn't told.
Yeah, you start connecting the dots.
Exactly.
You get other pieces of the
other
puzzle
pieces of the puzzle
as you read.
through. That's the funny thing because you see now like a whole picture, but you're like, okay, if
Right.
it was this,
If all we
but they
had
are all
was
there
Genesis,
Yeah.
books
we wouldn't know.
that amplify things that about
Yeah.
this part that he was saying about the dragon and all of that, like that you understand better who this person is, who's this serpent, if it's just like you said, a smart animal, or if it's just Satan. What is it? It tells you through other books.
Okay. So in chapter 14, Isaiah, right, the prophet Isaiah is actually speaking, and he's speaking basically a message of judgment, a message of warning. Okay, so in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 4, just so that it's clear, we're going to read verse 4. God is speaking to the prophet, and he says, "Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say how the oppressor has ceased, how the golden city ceased." So these words, he's talking to Babylon. Okay. Now God does this in a few places in the scripture. As a matter of fact, this is exactly what he does in Genesis chapter 3. Because it says God spoke to the serpent. But was he really speaking to the serpent? Or was he speaking to the agent that was working behind the serpent? So what we see here is that this is a prophecy. God is speaking against the king of Babylon. But all of a sudden, the dialogue changes. God does this. It is a pattern. Sometimes he mixes things. And so he'll start off with what is contemporarily happening, and then that'll allude to some future occurrence. Think about when the disciples asked for a sign. What's the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Jesus starts telling them about the destruction of Jerusalem, and then he kind of transitioned into the end of the world. Events that are separated by a vast number of hundreds, actually thousands of years. So he's speaking to Babylon here, and he's to the king specifically. When you look in Revelation, Babylon becomes a symbol for the enemies of God, actually throughout the scriptures. So he switches to speaking to Satan. And this is the reason why we know it's obviously Satan, because the words that we will start reading at verse 14 are definitely not describing a human being. They would not be applicable to Nebuchadnezzar or to any of the kings of Babylon. So at verse 14 now, 10 verses later, it says, not 14, verse 12.
You're in Genesis?
No, I apologize. We're still in Isaiah.
14 said.
Yeah, Isaiah 14. So the first thing that we read was Isaiah 14:4, that just says, speak these words against the king of Babylon. And then he's basically pronouncing judgment on Babylon. And then when we get to verse 12, notice what it says. How thou art fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How thou art cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mountain of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. And they that see thee narrowly shall look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this one man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? So we'll stop right there. And it says, how thou art, I'm going to start off with just the first few words. How thou art fallen from heaven, O Lucifer. The king of Babylon did not fall from heaven. There's only one character in the Bible that was exiled from heaven. Well, maybe not one. Satan and his angels. But the being that he's speaking about here was somebody that was exiled, or that fell from heaven, that was cast out of heaven. Let's go to a very similar passage to this, same notion. It's in Ezekiel chapter 28. And this time it's not speaking to the king of Babylon, it's speaking to the king of Tyre, another nation that was also in rebellion against God, that God prophesied that they would be destroyed. But again, it seems that God is speaking to kind of the nation, but really speaking to the agent that is working behind the nation, which we know is Satan. And we're going to go to verse 11, or verse 12 again. Ezekiel 28, verse 12. Son of man, this is God speaking to Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel this time, not Isaiah. Take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyre, of Tyrus, and say unto him, thus saith the Lord God, thou sealest up the sun, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Verse 13, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Was the king of Tyre ever in the Garden of Eden? No, he wasn't. Somebody else was in the Garden of Eden. Thou hast been in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of God, sorry. Every precious stone was thy covering. And he names the stones, the sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl. The workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pipes was prepared for thee in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. What's a cherub? A cherub is an angel or an angelic being. And I have set thee so. Thou was upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Notice this. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created till iniquity was found in thee. Human beings were born, but angels were created. Obviously, humanity was created, but angels don't have father and mother. We do. So this passage is, I believe, most definitely speaking about Satan. Very similar to the passage that we spoke before, right? There's basically this reprimand at how could you esteem to be above your maker. You were perfect, but you corrupted your ways. So God is speaking, obviously, words of condemnation to him. There's a whole lot more interesting things there, but does that make sense? Any questions, or you see the picture of Satan there so far? So there's a little bit of hints of Satan. Something that this brings to mind. This is something that I read recently in a book, and I thought it's interesting. It's plausible. So this is again just something interesting to think about. When Satan was in Eden, was it before or after his fall?
Before he
Well,
fall.
was the serpent, right? Like, okay, let me rephrase that question. The way that Lucifer is being described here, I'm actually asking a completely different question, even though it might sound the same. The way Satan is described here, does this sound like the Satan that we see in the Garden of Eden?
No. Before that.
Because it says, "Thou hast been in Eden, the Garden of God.
Before he was banished.
Every precious stone was thy covering.
Yeah.
Thou wert the anointed cherub." This is the description, probably not of, the snake that we see, right? But of Lucifer in his angelic state. So one recent Bible author that I was reading a book from, it's actually on the sanctuary, but there's some parallels between the sanctuary and Eden, and he basically says that this verse may seem to allude that Eden existed in heaven, and it may be that Eden was actually something that God took out of heaven and put on earth as a gift to man. Why that seems plausible to me is that right now Eden is again, well, I say again, assuming this is true, in heaven, because we see Eden restored again, or at the very least the tree of life, and the tree of life was in the middle of Eden in Revelation when God creates the new heaven and the new earth. So it's an interesting theory, and it is a theory, because there's it's hard to build the whole notion, I guess, around just that one verse and the little bits of information that we have in one or two pieces. But interesting to think about. But so here we see that there was an angel that was in heaven and was cast out of heaven. Did everyone see that so far? So this is where the notion of a fallen angel originates in the Bible. Now, how do we know that he was banished, and how do we tie the banishment to earth? And how do we tie the identity of the serpent to Satan? Is Revelation chapter 12. All right. I've read a few verses already, so sweetie, do you want to read?
Does it say what and I'm sorry, I'm going back a little bit.
No problem.
It
No
says
way
till
to.
wickedness was found in you.
Right.
Like you were filled with violence and you sinned. Like
Yeah.
where did it come from in Lucifer?
It's a
Like
good question.
we know how like Adam and Eve, how it happened to them. Like how does it happen with Lucifer? Did God give him more
There's
visibility?
I'd say it was a matter of pride. Still, the question would arise: is how did a perfect angelic being in the absence of sin
Right.
become proud, and how did sin originate? The Bible does not have an answer. And the reason I can say that very confidently is because there's two mysteries, and a mystery is something that can't be known. There's two mysteries in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
One that cannot be understood is basically the mystery of, yeah, that is one of them. I was going to save
What
that
did
one
you
for
say?
last. Mystery of iniquity.
Okay.
So basically, how sin originated.
Mm-hmm.
The other mystery that's spoken of is how God could become man. Those are the two mysteries, actually, that are mentioned in the Bible. But it is referred to as a mystery, which means that we don't know. There's
Who
no
refers
excuse
to
for
it
it.
as a mystery?
I can look
The
that one up.
Christian church or
The Bible.
the Bible?
Mm-hmm.
Second Thessalonians 2 verse 7.
Thessalonians what?
2 verse 7. Now, 2 Thessalonians 2, this passage here, is actually talking about the Antichrist, essentially. But in 2 verse 7, what it says is, "For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way." Your versions probably say something more along the lines of, "For the secret." Yeah.
For the secret power of lawlessness is
Yeah.
already at work, but the one who now holds it back will continue to do so till he is taken out of the way.
So, I like the King James a little bit. Bible commentators will comment, and I haven't looked at the words, so I can't really, I don't know from the newer translations, but I know that they'll comment on the words, iniquity, because sometimes you'll notice that God uses the words iniquity, sometimes he uses the word sin, sometimes he uses trespass, and so they're all descriptive terms that are pretty similar but mean different things. But here's the mystery of iniquity. So sinning is basically making a mistake, but iniquity is basically the path of evil. Basically choosing to do wrong, essentially. And so iniquity is referred to as a mystery, right? It's referred to here. So it's one of the two things that are mentioned. One in the New Testament is mentioned as the mystery of godliness, and that's referring to Jesus Christ's incarnation. But here the mystery of iniquity. So implying, right, this thing is of a mysterious origin. I'm not too sure about that. And the newer translation translated it, what was it, secret?
Yeah, the secret power of lawlessness
Yeah.
is already at work.
But mystery seems to imply, right, a mysterious element or unknown. But so I've heard scholars reference the mystery of iniquity because it's really not known why or how iniquity basically came into existence. We know who originated it, or we know in who it originated, but we don't know why. And it's certainly something that's kind of
The only thing that I do understand from the Bible when it says that, like he started trying to get basically God's position, right? I will
Yeah.
ascend to heaven. It's like pride.
That will be like
And
the
with
most.
pride, I guess everything else follows through, like
Mhm.
you just get to, like you said, you breaking eventually all the like commandments. Like basically, you're just trying to be like someone. Everything is focused on you, not on the other person.
Right. And here's one thing that, there's a lot of questions, I guess, in the Bible. One of the things that the Bible does tell us is that those things which can be answered, they will be answered,
There will be answers.
but heaven is the place where we get the answers. Essentially, now is the place where we live by faith. If we live by faith, then we're allowed sight, or to live by, with a different level of understanding, kind of a thing. We have a lot of answers now. We don't have all the answers. We never will have all, right, the same knowledge as God, but certainly we'll have a lot more access to a lot more insight and information than we have now.
And also, it seems to me that it took a long time, before he rebelled and stuff. He lived quite, I don't know how long before he just, Lucifer rebelled.
Yeah.
Because it looks like he knew God, that's why his intentions and all of that. Like, for somebody to know somebody, you need to spend time with that person.
Well, so, yeah. He was the covering cherub, or the angel that covereth, which basically implies the position that he held in heaven, right? That was what it said in Isaiah, I believe, chapter 14.
Mm-hmm.
You were, the covering cherub, or covering cherub. Or maybe that was Ezekiel.
No,
It was Isaiah or Ezekiel 28?
Called him the guardian cherub. Yeah, 28:14. You
What?
are anointed as the guardian cherub.
There you go. So your version says guardian. This one says covering, but even in the King James version, that does imply covering. So we know that means that he stood by God. He was basically the angel that stood by the throne of God. The covering and the guardianship that he had was over the throne of God. And the reason for that is because we have the desert tabernacle, without trying to digress too much, but we have the desert tabernacle, which is kind of a pattern, right? After heaven. We'll get there maybe someday. But we have what's represented as the symbol of God's throne in the Ark of the Covenant. You've heard the Ark of the Covenant, right? I mean, it's, so the Ark of the Covenant, golden box with two angels sitting on top of it. It's a symbol for the throne of God. The Shekinah glory, right, as you may have heard, was manifested over the Ark of the Covenant. And it manifested between the angels. So it's given us a picture, kind of what is in heaven, where God is surrounded by the covering angels, or the covering cherub, however you want to, describe it, and sitting on his throne. And that's how it's described, actually, when you look at the description of God's throne room in Ezekiel, or in Isaiah, or in Revelation as well. There's God, his throne, and then he's covered by these seraphim, or by these cherubim. So Satan was definitely not a lowly angel somewhere in the corner who didn't have access maybe to all the knowledge. He was actually probably the highest angel, and that would be a reason why he became jealous, because at some point in time he might have thought, why not me? Something that's not biblical, but it makes sense to me. So again, this is not by my commandment, but just against speculative, I could say, but seems plausible, is that he was most likely jealous of Jesus, because interestingly enough, Jesus relates to humanity as humanity. It's quite likely or possible that to the angels, how he was physically manifested was maybe as an angel. or perceived as an angel, so that Satan perceived him as an angel and thought, you're no different than me. Why can't I have worship? That's kind of could be an argument.
Just knowing the nature of Jesus, right? Jesus trying to be kind of like he preaches. He's not a person that will show off, like, oh, I'm the king and you are below me, like he identified himself with humanity, so that makes us think that he also did the same thing in heaven with the angels. Like he didn't look something different or about everyone, but at some point, like he said, like I thought it the same thing. I said the only way that you can feel jealous and say why not me if I see the other person almost the same as the same height, and we don't have a hierarchy. What's it called?
Hierarchy.
A hierarchy, or an obvious difference.
And then, as Jesus, we know that he was all the time humble. He never was presuming things like more like.
I mean, even pre-incarnate Jesus. Now, there are some interesting manifestations of pre-incarnate Jesus, but like, for example, to Abraham, he appeared as a guy traveling through the wilderness. And that's when he talked with him. And, even I think to other people in the scriptures, I forget the story, I think it was Samson's parents, he appeared as a human being. Because it wasn't until this individual that was talking to them and telling them that she was going to have a child all of a sudden disappears in front of their faces that they go, oh my goodness, we were talking to God, we're going to die.
Kind of like he blends in into history, like he never appears something powerful and mighty.
Alright, so I'm going to pull us back to Revelation so that we can finish. Revelation chapter 12. And then we can finish tying it back to Genesis so that we can end in Genesis.
Genesis.
Since we're at our
3 verse 8.
Yeah. Genesis Revelation. I'm just saying if you guys were paying attention. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 to 9. Did you want to read those, Leslie?
Mm-hmm. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him.
Okay, so this is the link. Right? This is how we know who the serpent is, right? It describes that there's war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. Michael, I'm going to open a can of worms here. Well, it's not really a can of worms, but I don't know if you've heard this or not. Michael being a symbolic name for Jesus. So Michael, not actually an angel. There's many people who believe that Michael is an angel, like Lucifer. I'm of the persuasion, and I think most Seventh-day Adventists are, but maybe not all. Most Seventh-day Adventists and many Christians are, will be one of those two factions. Either believe Michael is an angel, or Michael is actually Jesus, or symbolic name for Jesus. It seems to me, for this and many other reasons, but here's just one, is that you have basically two symbolic names kind of being given, right? And we know that there's definitely multiple names for Jesus given in the Bible, the Lamb, the Rose of Sharon, Counselor, Redeemer, and so on and so forth. But you have Michael and his angels, and the dragon and his angels. So they fight and they're cast out. Then we have the references in Isaiah and Ezekiel speaking of an angel that was in heaven, or at least an angelic being that was exiled or fell from heaven. And then right in Revelation, it tells us this about the dragon. It says the dragon was hurled out, that ancient serpent, right? Ancient, as in that serpent from a long time ago, as in like in the book of Genesis that we read about from way many years back. That serpent was the devil and Satan and the deceiver, not just of Eve, but of the whole world. See the connection? So that's how we know who that's how we know who the serpent is.
The old serpent.
Was there death in this war?
No.
So when they say they were not strong enough, what does that mean?
I don't know.
Rebel.
It's actually a mystery to me as to what the war in heaven might have been like. Obviously, you don't need to have death to have war, right? I mean, you just need to have a struggle. Whether they were, not to be facetious or jesting, but in all action, just really, whether they were fighting with lightsaber-like weapons or fighting, kind of with their minds, or fist fighting, or I have no idea how the conflict manifested, but there was a war, and it seems that at some point in time, I can tell you how I imagine it happening, but that's just my imagination. I definitely think that the war would have been physical, and this is the reason why God even probably allowed it to get to this point. Obviously, at some point in time, there was one angel that went astray, and that's referenced in the previous two passages. But now we have a war. Well, you don't just have a war break out and 1/3 of angels follow Lucifer without some campaigning or something happening. So it makes sense that he not only had this jealousy in his heart, this I want to receive worship, but he probably expressed it. And expressed it enough that he started getting a following. And at some point in time, what was maybe just, and this is just the pattern of revolution. Study any revolution. It started in a secret chamber, and then you start through, I have a feeling that many of the things that we see here are patterned after heaven.
Oh,
Yeah.
Law and order, even the order and organizational structure of the church, so many different, we really pattern things after
But it started before.
after things that have already existed. That's just what humanity does, right? And so
And everything
Our
starts like
revolution-
knowledge,
yeah. So
everything starts like that before it goes to physical.
so before it starts to go to war, you have to have enough of a following that he goes, okay, now we're here and we want to maybe, I don't know, we are here to protest against your government and we want a change of government. I don't know. Who knows if that's how it happened, right? But at some point in time, where God basically says no, then they said, well, if we can't have it, we're going to take it by force. I would imagine something like that is how it kind of broke out. And I believe that God is powerful enough to have prevented Satan from ever throwing a single fist. But what he does is he allows war to break out. And this, even though it doesn't say it, I'm pretty confident of, because we have a clear example of it in human history, is that God allows people to make choices in order so that it can be seen where they really lie, where their allegiance is. In other words, he doesn't judge before the evidence is there, even though he could, because he's the only being in the universe that knows what everyone will do before they do it. And yet he allowed basically the guilty parties to actually engage in the war, and after basically everyone took their side, he said, okay, you've all made your choices, now you have to leave. I don't think that it was a war because, at any point in time, like God really had a struggle here, or the angels had a struggle. I think it was more like God allowed war to break out so that everyone choose what side they were going to fight on. And everyone having chosen on their side, everyone having picked a side to fight on, everyone having chosen their side, then God now banishes Satan. Same thing when it comes to the world, really. All through the human experience, everyone is choosing sides. There is at the end, Revelation depicts one final great struggle where kind of again it looks like there's this war and everyone's going to, you have God and humanity that stood on his side and the humanity that stands on Satan's side. And then God is basically, at that point in time, he's not going to allow a fight. It will seem like the conflict is going to happen, and he's going to stop it, and all of the wickedness at that point in time will be punished, destroyed, and the good will continue on. But yeah, that's,
I think it's enough already what is being revealed in earth. You know how
yeah.
you can take your side. I mean, there is no more to let it go.
Yeah. So some of the things we have scripture for. Some things what we have is scripture that might help us to understand how it might have happened
That's what
by
I
looking
like
at
about
how
wars.
it's happened here.
Yeah.
Because it shows you, you know, when you see wars, even the French Revolution, everything that happened in the whole humanity history, it tells you that there is somebody behind that is basically kind of like it tells you how everything started, how a war starts. So it's a mind behind everything that it starts. And that's to me is like a picture of what was going on in heaven too.
There's a desire for something.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a desire for something. And we gotta take it, regardless you like it or not. And they go through all the way.
And yeah, interesting enough, I mean, that's the scriptures give us a lot of information, but they don't give us all the details, and that's where I guess we can use our imaginations to try and fill it in. But something that is said, and it's true, right? Ecclesiastes says, the thing that has been, it is that it shall be. In other words, that which has happened in the past is that which is going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. So history tends to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. It's likely that some of the history that we'll later get to see all the details of was maybe more similar to the things that happened here than we know. It might be different. I don't know. We'll see. Well, we're well over time, and we deviated quite a bit, but
it's a lot to go through.
Yeah. Any
this is a
final
very
question or
dense
comments?
chapter. Chapter 3 is a dense.
There's a lot in chapter 3. And we went. It's funny because I think the first session we had an intro.
Yeah.
There's certain parts where we'll probably spend more time than others for sure. But any final comments, questions, arguments, for or against?
I would also try to imagine if there was maybe some angels that repented from the rebellion, like something like, oh no, we don't want to go with Satan. We want to, I don't know.
Yeah. I would imagine, right? You know, like how many people all of a sudden when they see that war is happening, like maybe they were, and then they go, wait, no, this isn't, I didn't sign up for this kind of
Exactly.
I mean,
because sometimes you are deceived.
It's possible.
You did it, yeah, and you don't know the full intention, right? You just follow one thing that you were agree with, but you wouldn't agree with 100%. You were told only the few percent, and then what happened with the rest of it? And then you're like, oh wow. I'm involved on this. How can I go back?
That's happened in history too.
Yeah, he may have made himself look like, oh, poor guy, and then they were trying. No, he's not that innocent. I don't know.
The only thing that I see in history is that whoever leads you to a little bit of the truth that you were sympathizing with, and then kind of like they deceive you again. They said, no, you can't go back anymore. Like, you already went this far. Like, it kind of like it tells you that you already went too far, that you can't go back anymore. and you already were agree at the beginning, that's true that you didn't know the full thing. That's why history tells you. And that's why people say, okay, whatever, let's just go. I mean, I don't have no choice. I already gave you my consent to this degree. Let's just go all the way, you know. It looks like that.
Mm.
That's why history says. And that's the part that I really said. And that's what Satan does to people, you know. He always tells people, you already went too far. You don't have no way to go back. I mean, you think that God will receive you the way that you are? No. You might just die or kill yourself, right? Suicide, whatever you have to do, because there is no way for you to come back. Which very contrary what God says, right? Let's just come the way that you are.
All right. Well, we'll close here. We made it to verse 6. And we'll pick up here. Did we make it to verse 8? We did make it to verse 8. Yeah. So we were just talking about verse 6. Cool. Any volunteers for prayer? Nati, I'm going to call on you. There you go. Go for it.
Señor Dios que estás en los cielos, gracias por este sábado, gracias porque pudimos también estudiar tu palabra, gracias porque también prendes en nuestros corazones y en nuestras mentes el deseo de querer saber más, inclusive de cosas que quizás ni siquiera están escritas, Señor. Ayúdanos a mantener ese deseo vivo de que pronto vas a responder quizás todas estas preguntas y ayúdanos a que esto pueda ayudarnos a amarte cada día más. Gracias por este día sábado, por favor bendícenos y acompáñanos cada uno de los que estamos aquí y de los chicos que no pudieron venir también. En el nombre de Jesús, amén.
Amen.